few weeks ago, almost nobody outside of Cape Verde knew who Vozinha was. He'd spent most of his career playing outside football's biggest spotlight. No Champions League, no Premier League, no massive sponsorships. Just a veteran goalkeeper doing what he'd always done. That one World Cup game changed everything. A 40-year-old goalkeeper from a country with just over 500,000 people suddenly became one of the most talked about footballers on the internet. His Instagram exploded from 50,000 followers into millions almost overnight after his heroics against Spain. So, how did someone almost nobody knew become one of the biggest stories of the World Cup? Let's talk about it. Going into the tournament, Cape Verde wasn't supposed to make headlines. In fact, just qualifying for their first ever World Cup was already history. They were drawn against Spain, one of the tournament favourites. Most people expected it to be comfortable. Some predicted 3 or 4 goals. Instead, Spain couldn't score. Every attack seemed to end the same way, with one man standing in the way, Vozinha. If you didn't watch the game, you probably saw the highlights. Save after save, Spain kept creating chances. And somehow, he kept stopping them. By full time, he'd make 7 saves and helped Cape Verde earn a shock 0-0 draw, earning player of the match. Suddenly, people who have never heard of Cape Verde were searching one name, Vozinha. Here's where things got crazy. Normally, a great performance gets you a few headlines, maybe a couple thousand new followers. Not this time. Brazilian broadcaster Seis TV encouraged viewers to follow him after the match. Within hours, his Instagram started exploding. Millions of people followed him overnight. Think about that. One football match completely changed his life. At 40 years old, when most players are retiring, his career was only just reaching its biggest moment. It wasn't just the saves, football fans love an underdog. And Vozinha fit that role perfectly. He wasn't some teenage wonder kid being hyped up by every major club in Europe. He wasn't a superstar with millions of followers before the tournament had even started. He was a veteran goalkeeper from a tiny nation stepping onto the biggest stage in football and somehow looking completely at home. Cape Verde are one of the smallest nations to ever play at the World Cup. That alone made the story special. For a country with a population of just over 500,000 people, qualifying for the World Cup already felt like a miracle. Most nations that size never even get close. So when Cape Verde arrived and ended up going toe-to-toe with one of the strongest teams in the world, people couldn't help but root for them. They weren't expected to compete, yet they were, holding one of the biggest world teams to a draw. And that made the whole thing feel bigger than just one match. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about belonging. It was about a small nation refusing to be treated like an easy win. And leading the charge was a goalkeeper who had spent years playing away from football's biggest stages. That matters more than people think. Because when a player comes from a giant club or famous academy, or a country that always produces superstars, the story feels familiar. But Vozinha's path was different. He didn't come from the kind of football background that gets constant attention. He had to build his career the hard way. He had to keep showing up, keep training, keep waiting for his moment, even when the world wasn't watching. In an era where every superstar seemed to come from an elite academy, Vozinha felt different. And that's why people connected with him so quickly. His story didn't feel manufactured. It didn't feel like a marketing campaign. It felt real. A player who had spent years grinding away at the background, suddenly getting his moment in the biggest stage of football. That kind of story hits differently, because deep down, everybody understands what it feels like to be overlooked, to be underestimated, to wait longer than everyone else for your chance. And when someone finally gets that chance and makes the most of it, people naturally want to celebrate it. If he'd been 22, people would have called him the next big thing, but he wasn't. He was 40, and that changed the entire reaction. Because at 22, a performance like that would have been impressive. At 40, it became legendary. Most footballers have already retired by then. A lot of them are coaching, punditry, or just enjoying life away from the pitch. Their bodies have slowed down. Their careers are winding down. The idea of playing at the highest level in your 40s is already rare. But doing it in a World Cup match against a top tier nation, that's almost unheard of. Instead, he was playing the best football of his life. That is what made people stop and pay attention. Because football fans love a player who proves the usual rules don't always apply. We're used to hearing that athletes peak young, that once you hit a certain age, the decline starts. That the future belongs to the next generation, but Vozinha showed that experience still matters. Positioning still matters. Composure still matters. And sometimes having seen everything before is exactly what helps you survive on the biggest stage. He became the oldest player to appear in the First Nations World Cup match, making the achievement even more remarkable. That detail made the story even more powerful, because this wasn't just a veteran hanging around for one last tournament, this was a player making history while helping his country write its first ever chapter on the World Cup stage. That combination of age, pressure, and national pride is what turned a great performance into a story people wanted to share. It sometimes proves something football fans love seeing. Sometimes. Dreams are having an expiry date. And that's why the reaction went so far beyond football fans. People who don't even follow the sport could understand the appeal immediately. A 40-year-old goalkeeper from a tiny nation holding his own against Spain. That is the kind of story that feels almost too perfect to be real. People followed him for one match, but they stayed for the story. At first they saw the saves, then they wanted to know who he was. A 40-year-old goalkeeper from Cape Verde. A humble veteran who just showed up and delivered. That's why millions knew his name by the end. That's the power of the World Cup. Vozinha's rise showed why people love the World Cup. Every 4 years, someone comes out of nowhere. Someone the world has never heard of. And for a few unforgettable weeks, they've become the face of football. This time, it was a 40-year-old goalkeeper from Cape Verde, a player who spent years outside the spotlight, only become one of the tournament's biggest stars overnight. And honestly, that's what makes football so special. Because sometimes, the biggest stars aren't the ones that everyone expects, they're the ones nobody saw coming. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know which football story I should cover next.